Please, somebody please come. Somebody come now.
This 911 call reporting a child drowning is literally the very beginning of one of the worst child murder cases I've ever covered.
Oh my God, I'm at the Grand Prairie Hotel, and it's a little girl that is in the pool. She's drowned. Please send somebody right now. Oh God, she's blue. Oh God, please send somebody right now, ma'am.
Hi guys, welcome back. Today's case about Caliyah Goiton is one of those that is going to absolutely send shivers down your spine. I rarely get to a point when I'm researching that I need to take a break. I'm so used to it. I've worked in this area for a long time and in safeguarding and in therapy. So the reality is that I have a stomach for even the worst details, but my God, I needed to take a few breaks when I was researching this case, and as I go through this, you will fully understand why. Before I crack on, though, with today's case, I just want to answer a question that I've been asked quite a lot recently on here, because you guys really are armchair detectives of the highest level, and quite a few of you have been asking me whether I am with child, whether I'm pregnant. And the reality is, yes, I am. I'm 30 weeks pregnant. So I haven't been out there talking about it because obviously it's one of those things that you don't necessarily know how to broach the subject of. But yes, to those of you who are leaving comments saying, am I pregnant? I am pregnant. I don't know how you've really figured it out because I've just kept the camera in a direction where I didn't think you could see my bump, but I do have a bump now. And like I said, I will be having a baby in 10 weeks time. Also, I will not be stopping the content though. I will be carrying on with my consistency. I promise you will still get the same amount of videos every single week and more. I'm doing more content. So it will not affect the work I do here, but to all of you who've been asking whether I am indeed pregnant, I am pregnant. Etta needs a little sibling, and so we have been delighted that the IVF has worked and that we will indeed be welcoming a new little boy or girl into our world shortly. So I just wanted to clear that up before I carry on, because I've noticed more and more of you having that conversation, so I just wanted you to be aware. It's also why I'm so affected, I think, at the moment by these cases when we're talking about child abuse, because it's always been something that I've struggled with. I wouldn't work with sex offenders when I was therapeutically engaged in the psychological world. It's because of my particular opinions about the reality of needing to safeguard children that keeps me committed to covering cases like this, and also to having worked with cases like this in the past. And I feel at the moment that there's just that real presence of the amazing creation of life and the ward that we have to protect these children, and how we fail time and time again. And I'm using the word we, not because I'm blaming you or indeed myself, but because as a collective, I think that we recognise there's still so much work to do around protecting children. Today's case, like I said, is one that made me take a breather a few times. I won't try to hide from the brutality of it. I think that Kalia deserves truth, but like I've said, it's one of those that you really do have to strap in for, because there are some real challenges here. I'm also going to be holding the parents to account to some degree. I'm not saying I'm blaming the parents in any way, shape or form for what happened to this beautiful little girl, but I do think it's really important that we look at a chain of causation where children are killed, and we take responsibility and accountability for that chain of causation, which is how we can change things in the future. Also, if you're new to my channel, I release my content twice weekly here. Also, for those of you who are coming back to see my content, I hope you subscribed. If not, please do. Get your notifications on. Give me a like if you like the content. And if you want more of my content, you can get it behind Patreon and YouTube community membership. I actually release full-length videos there and also podcasts, and there'll be a lot more content coming up. Also, before we crack on with today's true crime case, just want to note that I am wearing my new merch, Vigilante. When the system fails, we prevail. I cannot help but love the word vigilante, but I wanted a little statement that kind of validates how we feel. So in the description below, you can, of course, go through the link, and if you would like to get one of these, you can get one. It will, of course, help to cover your pregnancy bump. Although obviously not as effectively as I'd imagined, because loads of you know I'm pregnant anyway. But let's get back to today's case. Who was Caliyah Guyton? Well, she was absolutely beautiful. That goes without saying. I think that all children are stunning because they are new life, and even when they have their quirks and idiosyncrasies, they are still peaches and cream as far as I'm concerned. No matter what shade of their skin, no matter what ethnicity, no matter who they belong to, they're born into this world just so beautiful. Kalia is somebody, however, who just is stunning. It's one of those faces that you would see on an advert, and it's one of those faces that exemplifies the innocence, naivety and beauty of children, full stop, and the fact that it's our job to protect them so deeply. She was born on the 9th of July 2019, and it's incredible to me that we're talking about her demise and death in 2025. Her mother was Chelsea Goiton, her father was Cody Buckingham. What was she known for apart from her incredible spirit? Because that's what people talk about a great deal with Kalia, that she had this incredible spirit about her. She was known for her long blonde hair. She had rosy cheeks. She's got this really wide, toothy smile. And people said that she had the most incredible, joyful spirit, this big, bright personality that lit up rooms. She was described by people as really bright. So even though she's still very young at the time of her murder, she knows all her colours, she knows her animals, she knows her ABCs, and apparently she would refer to herself as the boss baby because she felt more grown up, more mature than her apparent cry baby cousins. She was also said to absolutely love the cartoon Baby Shark, also Minnie Mouse, and her favourite colour was that stereotypical pink colour that so many girls gravitate to. Apparently one of the things that she would always wear were her pink studded earrings in her ears, and that was kind of her signature. Her grandma said in a quote about her, she was a bright light in a dark world, a bright, bright light. Wherever she went, she just lit up a room. And I wish we were talking about the brightness and lightness of this child's life. I wish we were talking about the accomplishments and the future, the hopes and dreams, but we're not. We're talking about the direct opposite. Because in the April of 2022, this is when Kalia is just 2 years of age. So bear in mind the age frame we're talking about now. She's 2. So her parents, Chelsea and Cody, they decide to take her on a trip. They're going to go and visit her grandparents. So Jeannie and Charlie are her grandparents. Now, at the time that they go and visit the grandparents, they're actually living at the Grand Prairie Motel. So they are there. They also have 2 family dogs there. And I am not a fae, shall we say. I am not up to date with motels in America. I'm sure there are some wonderful ones, and there are some more questionable ones. I would say this is a more questionable one. And it's a place that isn't necessarily ideal for young children, but I also want it to be noted that I am not in any way, shape or form being negative towards the grandparents. Listen, economics are a struggle at the moment. People are financially not in the best of places, and you want a roof over your head. And also if you have pets, that's going to complicate matters further because not everywhere takes pets. So they are obviously doing their best, and they are living in that place and situation that's not ideal, but it's a roof over their head, and it means that they can stay together with their dogs. Now, on the morning of April the 27th, 2022, whilst Kalia is actually staying at this place with the grandparents, she'd actually woken up, and then she'd gone down with Grandma Jeannie to get breakfast. This is around 10 a.m. And I'm sure that lots of you had experiences with young children when they're staying away from home. They're so excited. They're so excited. And the idea of being able to just go and eat different food at a different place and get served to some degree and not have to do the hard work and hard lifting. And I know that that's obviously the parent or grandparent's role, but nonetheless, the child picks up on that. It's such a nice experience. And I can look back absolutely with fondness at my own little boys as they were toddlers walking through the travel lodge to the all-you-can-eat breakfast for kids. And it was just so exciting. So Kalia's with Grandma, she's having fun. Jeannie wants to treat her, and she's obviously very committed to that relationship. You know, the fact that she wants Kalia with her and she's making that effort to make sure she's getting fed. And after this, Jeannie actually has to go out for work. So she leaves for work about 2:30 in the afternoon. So at 2:30, she goes, she heads off for a shift. At this point, she leaves Kalia with her granddad. Tragically for Jeannie, she doesn't realise this is going to be the last time that she's ever going to see that beautiful little girl alive. Now, Charlie, who's the granddad in this case, he wants to go down to the lobby, he wants to get some ice from the motel ice machine. Caliyah wants to be with granddad. Of course she does. She's curious, she's inquisitive, she's excited. She wants to do things that are a little bit different to normal. So she wants to go with him, and he happily obliges. Now this is where they run into Michael Geiger for the first time. I'm going to describe Michael Geiger as a monster from the get-go. If you imagine somebody who is born bad, this guy absolutely fits that paradigm. And I know there are people out there, there are experts out there who would disagree with me. Nobody's born evil, blah, 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 blah. But you know, we seem to have no problem saying that people have been born with nice temperaments, kind temperaments, compassionate temperaments with particular inclinations in positive ways. Why can't we talk about evil? Why can't we say that some people are born as human predators? And I believe that Michael Geiger absolutely fits that definition. Now, as Grandad and Caliyah approach the ice machine, they notice Michael Geiger. He's tall, he's a white guy, looks to be in his 50s, and one of the things that he was described as was somebody with prison tats. Now, we all know, particularly in America, that when you are incarcerated, often you will go in maybe without tattoos and you'll come out with some tattoos. Part of that is a belongingness, connectedness to gangs, for example, because it makes it easier if you've got people on your side. Part of it is because of boredom, but often they have a real signature type look, those prison tats, because they don't have the instruments that are required and the ink that is required to actually do professional ones. And even though some of them seem to be quite artistic in nature, they just stand out, usually because there's something aggressive or violent about the nature of those tattoos. So obviously the first impression of this guy is probably he's got a history, but as you will note shortly, that history, even though it exists, is something that's going to be tempered by the job that he's doing at the time that Grandad and Caliyah meet him. Now, this guy, Michael Geiger, is 51. He's, as I said, white male. He'd been hired by the motel basically to do their plumbing work. Now, what does that do psychologically to people who are there? If you are in a situation where you feel that somebody has employment, you instantly lower the bar where trust is concerned, because you think to yourself, hey, at the end of the day, this guy's got prison tats. He might be quite a standing out character type individual. He might make my hackles go up a little bit, but hey, maybe I'm just being judgmental, because we're constantly told in this world, crazily, that our intuition isn't always correct, when for the most part it actually is correct. It's warning us, it's a survival mechanism. Psychologically is there to protect us, but how often are we told, oh, it's not fair to judge, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Actually, sometimes we really should. But when you have these biases in your world, such as, well, he wouldn't have got a job unless he'd had some proper checks done on him, you are going to then feel, well, this person has got a level of authority in the environment because he's a plumber, and that means that I essentially don't have to worry about him to the degree I might have to worry about another type of stranger who isn't employed, shall we say, who's transient in this community. Now, it turns out that for that plumbing role, the motel had given him with 2 adjoining motel rooms, which makes sense because he's obviously living there. Now, apparently, on that meeting, Geiger looks down at Caliyah, smiles, and basically asks her whether she'd like some candy or chips. He also adds to that she looks pretty. Now, part of me, because I know this case, wants to just scream creep. But I also know that it's how we refer to children constantly as a compliment to their parents or grandparents. We want to tell them that we've noticed how sweet or how cute they are. So this isn't out of context where normal, healthy discourse is concerned. Now, Caliyah doesn't know this guy, so she is, as we would expect, quite shy in her response. She's 2 years of age. That's what we would expect from her. So she kind of looks to her granddad to confirm whether she can actually accept the candy. And he says, yeah, sure, it's okay. You can take it. At this point, Geiger says to Caliyah, God bless you, and then walks away. So of course, at this point, it can appear as if it's a normal encounter between an adult and a child, but the reality is there is a sinister underplay and undercurrent to this actual encounter. Now, later on, in the same day, Caliyah's out in the pool, she's playing with the mother Chelsea, and then by the side of that pool stands Caliyah's father, Cody. Also, Grandad Charlie is there. And Geiger comes over, starts chatting, so they talk with one another. And obviously, we know that Caliyah and Charlie have already bumped into him earlier in that day, so he's not necessarily a stranger to Charlie now. They have had this brief interlude and conversation. Geiger at this moment in time tells Cody that he's doing some plumbing work on the motel. He's got these 2 conjoining rooms. And he says, listen, do you and Chelsea, who is obviously the mother in this case, do you want to come to mine for a party? Gonna be honest, guys. If somebody said to me, do you want to come for a party and you're meant to be the plumber in the motel, I'm going to be questioning your motives. I'm going to think it's really weird. We don't know each other. Also, going and having a party with him sounds a little bit loaded. You know, I'm thinking drink and drugs straight away. And I've got a child. So the answer is going to be an absolute clear no. And I think it's kind of weird that Geiger's asking them when clearly there is a child that they're meant to be responsible for. But obviously, Cody doesn't get that memo and he accepts the invitation, which is a massive mistake. It's as simple as that. So then Chelsea, Cody, Charlie and Kalia, they all go for an evening swim and then they head back to their family room. Then apparently Grandad Charlie pretty much got straight into bed, fell asleep pretty instantly. This is between 8:30 p.m. and 9 p.m. And Chelsea, Cody and Kalia, they're all in their spare double bed. Now, they later claim they actually waited for Kalia to fall asleep before then sneaking out to go over to Geiger's room for the party. I suppose that what you can say here is that Grandad Charlie is present in that room. Therefore, if that story is true, they believe that they can actually leave this beautiful little girl safely with him. I think it is remiss and neglectful of the parents who are meant to be protective of this child to just go over to a stranger's to party when she is meant to be in their care and the care of the grandparents. It got to around 11:30 p.m. At this point, Charlie's awoken by the 2 family dogs barking. And the reason that he's actually woken at that time is because Jeannie has returned home from work. So just keep that in mind. The family dogs bark when she comes in. That means they're reactive, as most dogs are in these situations, and protective, as dogs are in these situations, and they notice when noises occur. Now, Jeannie, at this point, notices the door's been left ajar and also sees that the only person in the room is Grandad Charlie. Kalia's absolutely nowhere to be seen. Now, apparently her grandparents were immediately really concerned. They hadn't believed that Chelsea and Cody would, for example, have taken her to Geiger's party. They knew that they were intending to go, but why would you take a 2-year-old little girl to a party where there's clearly going to be alcohol and probably other things late at night? I mean, she needs to sleep. But the grandparents do reassure themselves. They think to themselves, at the end of the day, she's with the parents, and we have some concerns about the fact that they've taken her to a party, but she'll be in safe hands, or at least they hope that she'll be in safe hands. They also can't imagine that there's another explanation for the little girl not being present in the room. They have to reassure themselves that Kalia's safe with her parents. Now, what we know from the investigation about this case is when they search Geiger's room, it shows clear signs that the 3 of them, so Kalia's parents and Geiger, have been drinking alcohol. They'd also been taking drugs, specifically methamphetamine. Now, I'm sure that you're all aware methamphetamine is an incredibly powerful drug, and it also can cause people to be quite violent. I think we've all seen before and after pictures of meth heads. It's as simple as that. You want to stay the hell away from methamphetamine. And if you did have your child with you, and you're taking methamphetamine and actually drinking at the same time alcohol, then that child needs to be removed from you immediately, because you have no care or consideration of the impact that you could have on that child, let alone the fact that they are around that kind of drug alone. The very fact is that if you have them around that, you are neglectful. Now, it's clearly a party that no 2-year-old should be attending. We're not talking about princess hats and cake. We're talking about adult stuff that no child should be witnessing. Also, and this is going to really bother you, during that party, Geiger's said to be making really inappropriate comments about the beautiful little girl, the innocent little girl. In fact, at one point he says, "Your daughter is so beautiful, but she's too young for me." Now, I don't know about you guys, but let me tell you, I am not a powerful, strong woman, but that kind of comment could turn me to violence. And let me tell you, if you said that to my husband about my daughter, you better run. And he's a fast runner too, so you better run fast, because the level of inappropriateness of that comment is disgusting, it's diabolical, it's depraved, and it speaks of something totally inappropriate about the individual saying it. There's nothing wrong with saying your daughter is so beautiful or so cute, but to say she is too young for me means he's immediately sexualized her. So imagine what your normal, typical reaction of a parent would be. I don't care how high you are or how drunk you are, it is so left field to make that kind of comment that there should be some kind of reaction, but there isn't. And also on this very same night when he's being so highly inappropriate towards this little girl, he apparently offers Cody $5,000 to have his wife for 24 hours. Now, if you're in a scenario where your daughter's basically been sexualized, she's 2, and now this freak is offering you $5,000 to take your wife for 24 hours, is it just me, or would you be running in the opposite direction? Would you be thinking there is something absolutely wrong with this man? I would say the red flags that I've covered so far right now are enough to draw the attention of anyone, no matter how inebriated they are, to just how weird this situation is. But as opposed to just saying, you know what, thanks for the night, we're going to go to bed now, get your kid out of there as fast as, and so on and so forth, it turns out that whilst Chelsea did decline the $5,000, instead she says, you know what, even though I'm not going to go ahead and spend 24 hours with you, I know someone who might be interested in spending the night with you for $5,000. Yeah, I bet. Apparently, that particular motel is somewhere that, shall we say, sex workers frequent. So I would imagine the going rate of a sex worker isn't $5,000. Yes, I know there are some escorts out there who charge ludicrous amounts of money. We're not talking about that. The average sex worker would snap your hand, leg and head off for $5,000. It's not going to be hard, is it, to get somebody to come and have sex with a guy for 24 hours for $5,000. It's as simple as that. But apparently Chelsea says, I'll nip out, I'll call my friend, my contact, and I'll see if she wants to come to the motel for the night, which is disturbing because it means that in spite of all those red flags, it's not tempering their desire to actually be in that situation. Maybe it's the drugs, maybe it's the alcohol, but something must remain attractive for them. Now, Chelsea apparently at this point leaves the room, calls the woman that she's ready to set Geiger up with. Then it gets even weirder and worse. Because while she's gone to call this friend that she's now going to hook Geiger up with, he turns around to Cody and he says, listen, just in this kind of interim period between her going and finding out whether this friend's going to arrive, I'm just going to go in my other room because I'm going to go masturbate. That actually happened. Now, again, put yourself in that position. You're with some freak who's saying the weirdest stuff, who's being inappropriate around your daughter, who's asking to proposition your wife for 24 hours. Now he's being set up with somebody who's going to come and hopefully have sex with him for $5,000. And he's then looking you dead in the eye and going, by the way, I'm just going to go in the other room, pleasure myself a little bit, leave you in this situation, and then return after I've had a good time. Again, you would run a mile and think this is going to be one to tell people over dinner so that they actually are taken aback with the fact that these kind of things actually happen in life because it is so bizarre. But no, Cody doesn't question him. He doesn't say, you're an absolute freak, I'm just going to leave now. He just stays in that room and lets him go next door and have his way with himself. So whilst Geiger is pleasuring himself, shall we say, in the other room, Chelsea comes back and says to Cody, great news! Turns out my mate's going to come over because, I don't know, $5,000 is quite a lot of cash for 24 hours. So apparently it's a positive result and this friend's going to come over. And so they're excited because they're going to let Geiger know that he's going to have his way with this particular individual. All he needs to know is that he's got to pass that $5,000 to her. This story is so odd, isn't it? Is it making sense to you? Because to me, it's so confusing, but I will carry on nonetheless. But this is where we are. We are at a point where he has said all these things, done all these things, and yet still they are remaining in situ with this individual who is acting bizarrely. And apparently they're so excited by the fact that she's coming over, they decide they need to let Geiger know the good news. He opens the door to them, completely naked. Completely naked. Now, I know that some people are naturists. In the UK, it is legal to walk around naked as long as you're not being problematic to the community and you're just taking a walk, for example, through nature, like you're not hanging out around schools. That would be inappropriate. But naturists exist. They like being naked. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy who has just said to Cody, I'm going to go masturbate. And now, after going ahead and doing that, he's just flinging the door open, absolutely stark bollock naked. It's as simple as that. But they're not deterred. They're not like, well, this adds insult to injury and this guy really is on a scale of 1 to completely insane in his actions. They're like, it's fine, it's cool, let's just carry it on. So he's really happy with the arrangement that his friend's coming over. Apparently he's happy with the outcome of the phone call. He's really keen to see this woman. And Chelsea had arranged with the woman that she and Cody, again, let this sink in, that she and Cody would drive to pick her up and then bring her back to the hotel. So they apparently leave to do that. Why would you both go? Just doesn't work in my head. Either all go or one of you go. But for her and Cody to go, it's really strange. In particular when they're going to be in charge of a 2-year-old child, who I appreciate there will be some debate was present at that party or otherwise, but nonetheless, even if she is in the block of apartments, their priority should be Kalia. Now, when they get back with this woman, who's rubbing her hands together saying, $5,000, I'll take that, please, they all head to Geiger's room. They want to continue the party. But he doesn't answer the door. He doesn't answer the door to the room they'd been in or to the room that he'd been in, pleasuring himself just before they left. So they can't get any contact at this point from him. Now, this is where everything gets confusing, because there is some real inconsistencies with the stories from Kaliyah's father and her grandmother. So this is what plays out. Jeannie, she says that she's woken by Cody, who's banging on the door screaming, "Where is my daughter?" So just let that work into your brains, because it's really important that you kind of hold this information. Where is my daughter? Well, apparently, we were told earlier on that they left Caliyah in the bedroom with Grandad Charlie, and then they went to party. So he should know where his daughter is, if that was the case, right? Because she was left asleep in that room with Grandpa Charlie when they went to party. So why is he on the outside of the room hammering, saying, "Where is my daughter?" It's a really strange response from someone who supposedly left the door asleep in their family room with the granddad and the 2 family dogs. Cody, he, however, says that he, Chelsea, and the girl that they brought back for Geiger didn't do that. They immediately began to search the hotel looking for Geiger because they wanted to connect with him so they could go through with this deal. So Cody's story is entirely different from Jeannie's. And I'm going to have to throw this in. Cody's been taking meth and drinking alcohol. So if I'm going to believe somebody's story, Jeannie is going to be the story that I believe when it's told. But yeah, they're suggesting that all they're doing is trying to find Geiger to connect this woman with him. Now, during this search for Geiger, they come face to face with what can only be described as the worst scene any parent can imagine. It's a nightmare beyond hellish. It really is. It's around 1:45 a.m. that they get to the pool. And when they get there, they see Caliyah face down in the pool. She's got a pair of orange shorts wrapped around her neck, and those shorts are the same pair that Geiger had been seen wearing earlier that day. Now, Cody performs CPR on Caliyah, and a worker at the hotel calls 911. The Enid Police Department are called out. During that particular call, the worker is obviously incredibly affected by what's playing out. You can just hear the panic in her voice. She's trying to remain calm. But wow, what she is describing is the stuff of nightmares. She's holding herself together, but you can just feel that panic bubbling beneath the surface. And she's describing Caliyah as blue. She says that she thinks the baby's gone. She says the face is blue, the extremities are blue. And the operator obviously tries the best to talk about how to perform CPR, but you can understand being the caller and looking at the child and thinking there is no hope, you're going to be relaying that information.
Please, somebody, please come. Somebody come now. Please. Okay, where are you at? Oh my God, I'm at the Grand Prairie Hotel. And it's a little girl that is in the pool. She's drowned. This lady and these 2 people just came down looking for her, and she was in the pool, and she's drowned. Please send somebody right now. Oh God, she's blue. Oh God, God. Please send somebody right now, ma'am. Well, help is on the way to you. I'm going to give you instructions on how to do CPR. CPR, but I got to tell you, I think this baby's gone because the face is blue, the extremities is blue, the baby was not moving.
The ambulance arrives quickly and then takes her to Integris Baptist Hospital. But there is, as the initial caller said, nothing that can be done, and she's pronounced dead there. When it comes down to the findings in this case, it has to be one of the most brutal, disgusting, and deplorable cases that I've covered. They described what happened to Kalia, this little girl who's been found in that pool, as an individual who's gone through an aggravated assault, and the incident they described as very disturbing indeed. Geiger's room was apparently described as a very bloody scene. When they actually found Kalia, one of the things they noticed was that she just had one of her pink earrings left in, the other one was missing. They then searched the shorts that had been tied around her neck, and guess what they find? 2 hotel room keys in the pocket, along with a wad of cash. They then check the room keys, and sure enough, they lead back to the 2 rooms that the motel had supplied Geiger with whilst he was doing the plumbing work for them. The police went then to actually do a proper forensic investigation of the room that Geiger had been inhabiting, and they relayed the information that when they did that, what they found was truly horrific. As I've mentioned, when they entered the room, they said it was literally covered in blood. The majority of that blood was actually on the bed. Also, on that bed lay perfectly laid out gummy worms. They'd clearly been hand placed, they weren't spilled from a packet. They also found apple juice bottles that were scattered across the room. They were, by the way, the exact same bottles that Kalia had in her family room, and the amount in Geiger's room actually matched the amount missing from the family's room. By the bed, they found the little girl's clothing, along with blood-stained knickers that had a baby shark logo on the front of them. That scene in itself just breaks my heart. Baby shark knickers, covered in blood, because this monster had had access to this little girl, this 2-year-old. They also found that pink missing earring, which was covered in blood. It was stuck in the side of the bed. When the police turned on the TV, it had been turned to face the bed and it had been flicked to a kids' cartoon channel. So Geiger had clearly set up his room to basically entice a child. Also in Geiger's room, they found a homemade fleshlight. Apparently it's a type of male sex toy, and it had blood and semen inside it. I mean, it is the stuff out of horror movies. The court reports that actually explored what happened to Kalia, it said that, first of all, his room showed that she sustained the most horrendous injuries. Copious bleeding and trauma is the quote. When they did the actual autopsy, and there was the examination clearly by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, they wrote she had extensive trauma to her vagina, including abrasions and serious tears to both its exterior and interior. They understandably collected DNA swabs, and they also then took one from Geiger's penis, and essentially that DNA matched the DNA on Geiger's penis. She had been violently raped before her murder. Can you just let this sink in, guys? She's 2. She's 2. And the police also said, which was verified in the report by the medical examiner, that she was physically brutalised in the process of being murdered. She actually had burst blood vessels throughout her face, her head, her chest, and her vital organs. This proved that she was forcibly strangled, she was unable to breathe, and actually her brain became swollen because of that. Also, she had suffered numerous attacks. She had bruises around her face, her mouth, her chest, her other areas. And when they'd done Kalia's autopsy, it was said that the reason that those shorts were around her neck was because he had basically strangled Kalia with them. Also, he'd then thrown her into the pool from the 2nd story of the hotel. After brutalising and torturing and violating her in this way, he'd thrown her over a balcony. into water. She's a baby. And the worst part is Kalia was still alive at that point. In fact, it was while she was struggling to breathe from that horrific attack of strangulation that she drowned in the water. Her lungs were swollen and she had white frothy fluid found in her airways. So she died essentially from a lack of oxygen caused by strangulation and also drowning. Only hours earlier, this child had been enjoying breakfast with grandma, going down to get ice with granddad, feeling safe, feeling happy, feeling excited. And then she's just met her end in probably one of the most brutal attacks I've ever described on this channel. It's inconceivable to me that human beings exist who can carry out this level of hostility and brutality to the most innocent beings on this planet. Now, the employees of the hotel, one of the things that they had noticed on the evening was Geiger was acting really weird. So he was basically walking around the lobby with an apparent panicked look on his face. They also said that he'd last been seen at the motel around 11:47 p.m. This is when a front desk clerk had seen him leaving with a pair of gloves and a pillowcase. She felt like that was really strange. She'd alerted the maintenance worker, who then went to check on Geiger. But that worker noticed Geiger and said he was leaving his room with what he believed at the time was a baby doll. Now, Geiger managed to leave the hotel before the police showed up. In fact, it took them 7 hours before he was located. And when he was located, he was found on the rooftop, which was located nearby the hospital. At this point, he was understandably arrested immediately. They found him still with that pair of bloodstained gloves and also the bloodstained pillowcase. He had blood all over his hands, all over his body at the time of his arrest. And that, again, just brings in the reality of that brutality. The fact that he's covered in this child's blood. This child's blood. And he's wandering around in this absolutely agitated state, which, yes, some people could say, well, there's mental health issues going on there, and that will be brought in later on. But no, I just think he knows what he's done. He knows what he's done. He knows there's no escape. He knows that he's been caught banged to rights. And he's agitated because he knew it was coming. Now, what Kaliyah's family discover later is just truly devastating. They find out that Geiger had just been released from prison. In fact, it was less than a month earlier he'd been released. This is the 29th of March 2022 that he'd actually got out. He'd actually served a 10-year prison sentence. That is a lengthy sentence. Now, the District Court of the 4th Judicial District of the state of Oklahoma, they stated that Michael Geiger had previously been convicted of a felony crime of robbery with a firearm and kidnapping of Blake Edward Morris. And between August 1992 and March 1993, he'd also engaged in various acts of sexual assault upon a victim known as KLH. The victim was 13 years of age. He had committed rape in the first degree, forcible oral sodomy, and rape in the first degree by instrumentation. He was also found in possession of a homemade knife. Why is he walking the streets? Seriously, I just will never get past the fact that sex offenders get let out. They have something intrinsic to their nature that makes them want to sexually assault. They are sadists. They're never going to be safe to walk the streets. It's as simple as that. The only way they'd be safe to walk the streets potentially is if you cut their arms off, cut the penis off and put a big, I don't know, pea on the head to let everybody know that they are into children. Maybe they wouldn't have the option at that point to do very much and also be kept away from the World Wide Web forever, have no digital devices forever. And even then I would question that they were safe. The idea that he got 10 years and served 10 years for that blows my mind. Now, on the 22nd of September 2009, he also committed the crime of assault and battery on the prison's medical officer, Kathy Miller. On the 18th of June 2010, he threatened corrections officers at the Oklahoma Department of Corrections. He said, one of these days, you're going to get what's coming to you. Now, that means he has really poor impulse control. He doesn't respect boundaries. And it also means that he hasn't learned the consequences of his actions, because if you're attacking corrections officers, if you're threatening them, it means that you haven't changed your behaviour. So how on earth can people like him ever walk the streets freely? Also, to add to this mess, Geiger was also a member of the United Aryan Brotherhood. Now, that's a criminal organisation whose members are known to constantly constantly be carrying out crimes of violence on behalf of that group. The Aryan Brotherhood is a neo-Nazi prison gang, an organised crime syndicate. It's based in the United States, and it has an estimated 15 to 20,000 members, both inside and outside prisons. So he's so unsavoury on every single level. On the 25th of January 2012, he actually attacks another corrections officer using a makeshift weapon. And apparently he was very violent towards other inmates. He hit one in the head with a sock filled with batteries, which caused the victim's head to bleed from the injury. He'd also been denied parole in October 2021 because of these multiple behavioural incidents, including meth use in prison. I mean, what is this guy doing with his time? Beating people up, threatening guards and getting high. How is he somebody who should ever be allowed to be free when he's still not taking accountability and responsibility for his actions? But as we see time and time again, the law is an ass. In spite of these incidents, Geiger's released from prison on the 29th of March 2022. He was free for just 30 days before he murdered Kalia. And also what we know about sex offenders who go to prison for serious crimes, one of the things that they realise and ruminate over when they are incarcerated is that the victim has caused them that issue. The victim is a witness. The victim can give testimony against them. The victim is the problem, therefore. And so certain sex offenders realise during their incarceration, well, you know what? What I need to do is remember never to leave a living witness. So they go from being sexual sadists, violators and rapists to being sexual sadists, violators, rapists and murderers. Because then they think they can get away with it. They don't think about what's wrong with me, I'm a monster, I need to change my behaviour, there's something entirely broken about who I am, my predilections are disgusting. They don't do that. They go, how do I get to use these predilections that I wish to use with my urges and make sure that the person doesn't get an opportunity to actually get any kind of justice for themselves because I murdered them instead of actually allowing them to breathe freely and take those options to actually make me take responsibility for my actions. That's not how they work. They just think I'm going to eradicate the issue, in this case, the child. Now, you won't be surprised to know that during his first court appearance, he pled not guilty because these kind of individuals are monsters. So why would they have to abide by the law? And why do they have to believe that the law is correct? And therefore, when they're actually asked, are you responsible? Are you guilty? They can happily reduce themselves to a position where they go, well, even though I know what I did, at the end of the day, it doesn't make me guilty because I didn't do anything wrong, because their conscience allows them to extend to that position. Now, although he pled not guilty, and he also denied his crimes, there are certain statements that he made which also did support the physical evidence collected at the scene, so it's contradictory in nature. So, for example, when the police questioned him about the shorts around Kaliyah's neck, saying, listen, this matches a pair that you're wearing earlier in the day, Geiger responded saying, I have lots of shorts. So he wasn't denying they were the shorts, he's just saying, hey, at the end of the day, I can strangle a kid with these shorts, throw them in the pool, and I don't have to worry, I've got loads of different shorts. He showed absolutely no remorse for the horror scene he created. Also, when the police speak to him about the crime scene in his room, he said, a lot of people are in and out of my room. Because obviously, that happens, on a regular basis, isn't it? You're in your house, you're in your bedroom, and there are just these indiscriminate individuals just walking through, walking in, walking out, you don't know who they are, just making a massive crime scene. You come on, makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But again, he's trying to deflect responsibility, he's trying to project blame. It could have been anybody. Lots of people are in and out of my room. Well, you know what? You're the ones with the keys, so we're disputing that. And also, the hotel staff and those people who then looked at the CCTV from the hotel were able to disprove that comment. So the digital information demonstrated that there was only a few people in and out of his room that night. As we know, it's Kaliyah's parents and him. Now, at this point, Geiger's held without bail, which we would want because he is somebody who can never be free. Let's just get that out there right now. We don't need a court case. We don't need a jury. We don't need anything like this. Guy literally needs to be incinerated immediately. I know that hell is coming for him, but can we just speed the process up? That's all I'm saying. This guy should never be allowed near another human being because we know he attacks anybody and we know he's willing to murder and rape a child. So with respect, he should be kept in a cell and no human should go near him. He should just have things pushed through when it comes down to what he needs to eat and drink. He's too dangerous to be around. Then it's announced in November 2022 that the prosecutors had the intention to seek the death penalty against him. We don't have that in the UK, but let me tell you, if we did, I would 100% be supporting them going for the death penalty where this monster is concerned. And they actually cited multiple aggravating factors. Firstly, including those previous convictions I've outlined, the fact that he hadn't healed, changed, created consequences for himself in his life that meant he'd taken responsibility for his actions, the fact that he was still a violent offender, in fact, he'd escalated. They're all very important aggravating factors. Now, in November 2023, sadly, he's deemed to be incompetent to stand trial. This is by the Oklahoma Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. They said he's got a delusional disorder, and the psychiatrist said that Geiger, quote, doesn't comprehend his legal situation and charges and isn't mentally competent to help his defence in trial. Can I just throw it out there, Mr. Psychiatrist? He's not going to be able to help his defence at all, because his defence need to defend a man who raped, murdered a child in the most deplorable of ways. He violated her, brutalised her, threw her over a balcony so she could finally drown after being strangled. I am struggling to find where there would be a redeeming quality that the defence would require to help fight this case. Everything about this case demonstrates that there is no defence. Now, sadly, there's been no further updates on the proceedings since that announcement. Obviously, I hope, beyond hope, that they will create a scenario where he is found competent to stand trial, and then he will be met with the gravest of consequences for his actions. Now, the charges that he actually faces are first-degree murder, first-degree rape, kidnapping, and also first-degree burglary. So when he does finally get competent, and hopefully that will happen, that's what he's facing. Now, when it comes down to the parents, I want to go through this a little bit because there's a lot of conflict within me about the parents. And like I said, they're not responsible for her murder, but I think there is a chain of causation and we always have to explore that. I said that earlier on. Now, Cody had a criminal record. He had a criminal history of his own. He'd previously been arrested for armed robbery. In fact, he'd left one of his victims in such a state that they had to go to hospital with their injuries. So I'm giving you that background history, not because people can't change, we know that they can, but because it sounds like he has issues himself. And certainly the fact that there's been drug charges before, and we know that he was taking drugs this night, it demonstrates a neglectful attitude, I feel, when it comes down to his child. Now, people were outraged when the information about what happened to Kalia got out, and there was a petition made to charge the parents as equally responsible as Geiger for the death of their child, and that petition has over 4,000 signatures. In a deleted Facebook post, in fact, Cody has stated that he, quote, fucked up and failed his little girl. Yeah, he did. You know, you can delete your post, but truth is truth, you really did fuck up. And you really did fail your little girl. And I also appreciate that we should never have to be that concerned about monsters like this in our community because they shouldn't exist. We all have a bias of security, believe that things will be okay. And when we're proved wrong in the worst way possible, obviously, then that's a very hard lesson to learn. But lots of us believe that the world is safer than it actually is. But with respect, what they were doing that evening, it shows a neglectful attitude towards that little girl. Now, apparently, something that really bothered the public as well is that he and Chelsea, they started a GoFundMe for her funeral. Now, that is really typical. We see that happen time and time again. Funerals are expensive. You know, at the end of the day, even dying is incredibly expensive these days. So we do see lots of people who are economically struggling asking for people to donate to GoFundMes to help them put on things like funerals. But the reason this was frowned upon is they were already getting money for the funeral through the Oklahoma Victims Fund, and that offered between $7,000 and $10,000. Now, Kaliyah's parents, they said that they were actually going to go ahead and sue the hotel for $75,000. They said that the hotel doors were faulty and that the security cameras were broken. Just going to throw it out there. Just think about what that sounds like. You're trying to project blame onto the hotel, and maybe security was lax, and maybe security was poor, and maybe they could do more. But man, you're the one taking meth and getting high and drinking alcohol and going and getting sex workers or friends who are willing to be a sex worker for the night to bring to this guy that you don't even know. The guy who masturbated in a room openly telling you that that was going to be the case. The guy who opened that door naked. The guy that looked at your child and said that if only she were older, that he could have her, essentially. And you're blaming the hotel for what played out? Now, don't get me wrong, the hotel is culpable to some degree, without a shadow of a doubt, and I'll tell you why. Why was Geiger given the plumbing job at a family hotel just 1 month after getting out of prison? It should not have been the case. Families are there. People are there. He's not safe around anybody. He had been in prison for a 10-year sentence for kidnapping. We know about the sexual inappropriateness that he'd played out with a victim of 13. And what we actually found out was that Geiger's sister was the manager at the hotel. It's likely that that's why he got the job. That's not been confirmed, but let's be honest, that's going to be why he got the job. Why were there not background checks done on him? It's appalling. The other question that I have, I kind of highlighted earlier on. If Cody and Chelsea had slipped out once Kalia had fallen asleep, how would Geiger have got into their room without disturbing the dogs and the grandfather? Remember earlier on, Jeannie came in, the dogs went off at 11:30 p.m. So if this stranger gets into the bedroom, those dogs are going to kick off. Also, the apple juice was taken from Kalia's family room. So we're expected to believe that Geiger gets into the family room, doesn't disturb the dogs, removes the exact amount of apple juice from that room silently, like some kind of magician who can basically ensure that grandfather doesn't wake up. I mean, that makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense that there was no disruption. There was no impact on grandfather's sleep. Just to reinforce again, the two dogs barked when Jeannie got home from work. So if a strange man is breaking in and taking Kalia and taking apple juice, and how is he going to do that in two arms? It doesn't make sense. Loads of bottles of apple juice and Kalia silently. It doesn't make sense at all. So for me, I have to ask that question. Does it mean that Corey and Chelsea took Kalia with them? Took her to the party? Brought the apple juice to placate her, to keep her going whilst they drank, whilst they took drugs? Because that would absolutely explain how the apple juice was in the room, and also why no disruptions were made to Kalia's family room. Also, we know that Kalia's grandmother, Jeannie, gets home around 11:30 p.m. and she notices immediately that Kalia's missing. Now, the 911 call, we know, wasn't made until 1:45 a.m. Now, if Corey and Chelsea hadn't taken Kalia, why is there this 2-hour window unaccounted for where Kalia goes missing? And also, why did the parents of a 2-year-old dismiss a 51-year-old man's comments on how their daughter is so beautiful but too young for him? And if Corey and Chelsea had waited until Kalia was asleep, as I said earlier, why did the grandma state that she was woken by Corey banging on the door, screaming, "Where is my baby?" If you'd left your baby in the family room with the grandfather, why would you automatically assume that something bad had happened to her? So again, it just begs that question. Is it because they had taken Kalia to Geiger's room whilst they parted and maybe even left him alone whilst they went to pick up the female company that arranged for Geiger? And maybe that was why he wasn't answering the door and was nowhere to be seen. And I just really struggle with the fact that Cody's story does not align with Jeannie's, because like I said, she wasn't high. She was processing what was happening that evening, and it really disturbs me. So a lot of people online, and believe me, there has been a vitriolic reaction to this case. A lot of people have posed the question with the parents after the money. Were they going to pick up a friend? Was that just something they actually introduced so that they had a story to defend themselves? Or is there a possibility, and this is what people are saying online, I'm not saying this is the case, by the way, but this is what's circulating. Did they intend to take the $5,000 in exchange for Geiger to have Kalia for the night instead? That absolutely disturbs me even saying it, and I'm certainly not saying that that's the case. I'm saying that where truth does not exist, these kind of stories become rife. Because if you have nothing to hide, you hide nothing. And I don't understand why Jeannie's story is different from Kalia's father. I trust Jeannie in this case. And that $5,000 and the story around it, and Kalia being in the bedroom, but then banging on the door saying, where is she? None of it's making sense to me. And I've tried my best to manifest an understanding of this, and I still come back to the same position. I believe Kalia was in that room with her parents when they were partying. I don't know what else happened, but I fully believe that they know that she was present with them at that moment in time. Now, understandably, there has been an absolute outpouring of grief regarding this case, and in her memory, there was actually a memorial created on the 29th of April at the doors of the motel where people left stuffed animals, candles, pictures of Kalia because she was beautiful and she needs legacy, and we need to remember the beauty and light, not the darkness and death. And people who don't know you care deeply when these kind of things happen to children. It's one of those things that we see play out time and time again. There is always this outpouring of community. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and absolutely it takes a village to mourn one. Also at that memorial, motorbikes came just to rev their engines, and everyone dressed in pink, which is of course her favourite colour. And there's actually a Facebook page called Justice for Kalia, and it shows just how affected the whole community has been by what can only be described as one of the most brutal murders I've discussed on this channel. And I suppose as I'm coming to the end of this particular story, it's bringing it back to the fact that this beautiful, bright, innocent 2-year-old girl whose life was just full of promise was stolen from this world in the most brutal of ways. It's left a family shattered. I appreciate that there are questions about the responsibility of the parents and whether they were neglectful and the inconsistencies in the story. But without a shadow of a doubt, I fully believe that the impact of losing this child has been massive on the wider family and also the wider community. And the question that we are going to be left with today is, how did it happen and why did it happen? Why did the people directly entrusted with the care allow her to be put in harm's way? Because her parents did that. And the monster that is Michael Geiger right now hasn't even been tried for these horrendous crimes. The fact that this man wore a mask of acceptability and responsibility, being the plumber, and he used that mask to exploit and destroy this beautiful little girl with the most brutal violence ever, it begs the question, how come he's not competent? Because he seems to be an incredible manipulator when it suits him. And then there are those really challenging discrepancies, the mismatched stories, the disturbing behaviours, the unanswered questions. And this just deepens that mystery of how this little girl was so tragically failed by those who should have protected her. You know, Kalia's life had meaning and infinite possibility, and it was just taken in the most brutal of fashion. And while she's never going to be forgotten, partly because of that brutality, she doesn't get to live another day. She doesn't get to breathe another second. And I don't feel that justice has been served right now. It's still unfolding, and it might, in the end, be served. But like I said, I think Geiger is a manipulator. I think he knows how to play the game. And I think he's so intensely egocentric that he got away with what he wanted to get away with, which was to rape and murder this beautiful little girl. He'd been planning it. Let's be clear, there was a motive throughout that day. Does that sound like somebody who's unhinged, or does that sound like somebody who knew exactly what they were doing? I want Kalia Goiton's memory to live on, to be bright, to be a shining light in this darkness, and to remember that no matter the darkness that surrounds all of us, we have to be that village. We have to protect our children. We have to seek justice and demand justice for those whose voices cannot be heard any longer. And when it comes down to Michael Geiger, like I said, in the UK, we don't have the death penalty. There is a relief within my nature because of that, because we do make mistakes. But where this is concerned, I would happily press whatever button needs to begin those injections. I would pull the lever to make sure he got electrocuted. Hey, I'd personally do it if they wanted to put a bullet in his head, because the reality is his actions do not in any way, shape or form suggest that he deserves any kind of existence. He is not human, he is inhumane, and he should not be afforded, therefore, the human rights that we so often bestow on individuals who simply have betrayed trust in so many places, spaces and people's lives that they do not deserve it and they do not deserve them. Human rights should be for human people, and Michael Geiger is a demon of the highest level. As ever, I would like to know your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate that the parents have lost a child, and I appreciate that must be very challenging. And I don't want people to be directing abuse or anger at them, because I'm sure they have enough of that anyway. But I cannot do this case without being truly open and honest about the failings that I think occurred. Kalia deserved better, and she didn't receive it from the very people who should have given it her. And whilst they are not responsible for her killing, Michael Geiger is 100% responsible for her killing. The reality is, could it have been prevented? And the answer is, in my opinion, yes. Please let me know your thoughts. As ever, I will see you again next time, guys. Look after yourselves. Be safe.